Alright, so I thought I would, this video shall be called Broken and Reborn, Schizophrenia, Satan's Mind, Sainthood. And this is going to get into some territory that is insane to understand. But when you let it hit you fully, it's like, whoa, dude. And my purpose here is to explain and relay, partly for purposes of what schizophrenia can be like, and if I'm a saint, I'm not sure, but I think I might be a saint, because I don't think many people typically get these kinds of experiences. And then, while God's guiding them personally, and then potentially, like, they get redeemed in this life and succeed in life after these visions. It's kind of like beyond Cthulhu, but it's like, it's basically like if evil itself was as infinite as God, as labyrinthine as Cthulhu, and malevolent as Satan all at once. Imagine for a second that you had somehow tricked God because he didn't understand how evil you were, because you're just that evil, and you murdered him. So there is no God. There's a gaping void where God was. And Satan is not embodied. He's ascended to the very act of being itself, which is what God is described as in Christianity, basically, the act of being itself, or being itself. And so Satan had ascended to being itself, in, like, not just a being, like a single entity, but like the very existence itself. And the idea that not only had you failed to prevent that, but that you had served it knowingly the entire time. And I don't mean knowingly in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to do this and I know how to word it and I'm going to like say it to myself out loud and stuff. I mean, like, you've put up a veneer that even you believe, but deep down in your heart, when you're honest with yourself, you're like, I'm doing the opposite of what I say I'm doing. My existence is a mask, and I am serving evil incarnate, or I'm serving existence itself as evil itself, knowingly and purposefully. And even my attempts to prevent it are just a mask so that I can continue to do so undetected. And the idea that you're not only dooming mankind to not exist in the future, but that you've condemned all people, past and present, with no future for anyone anymore, into hell beyond hell, where the laws of physics are against you. They're malevolent. The laws of physics are malevolent. And every single spiritual angle is malevolent. And you are a disembodied spirit, eternally existing, yes, but only to be tortured. This isn't I have no mouth and I must scream, where you can relegate people to oblivion to save them from torment. This is condemning every single person to be in the protagonist of I have no mouth and I must scream situation that ever existed, because one killed God. And that means every man, woman, and child that has ever existed and will ever exist and already exists. That is the terror that I faced. That I was a servant of betrayal to everything I thought I hold dear. Sort of like, I'm trying to think here. Sort of like, Darth Revan, in a sense, where like the Jedi wipe his mind, and then like imagine he goes back to the Sith, because you can choose that in Knights of the Old Republic KOTOR, I think. And it's just natural to him. It's his nature, or one's own nature, to do evil. And no matter how many times the mask gets put up, it's just a front to hide their secret dealings and doings, and so on, in the service of the infinitely labyrinthine and malevolent existence itself, because you killed God and Satan took up the throne and ascended and gained all the God's powers. To put it into context, if nuclear Armageddon were the alternative option, if everyone gets to go to heaven after everyone dies, and you kill literally every single thing on the planet, no amoeba even surviving, but it all goes to heaven, except you get this treatment, you would pick it over my vision of hell, even if you don't benefit personally. Or maybe you're the kind of person who would only pick the good alternative, relatively, if you also go to heaven. And that ties into something about the title, which is sainthood. I, in my schizophrenia, faced these conundrums in my mind. Now you might say it's unrealistic, but it was truly believed. And the thing that will make me a saint, and time will tell if I get popular or famous and rich and like successful conventionally in life, the typical good life that people want and so on, or something like that, or just really helpful to people with schizophrenia or post-traumatic stress disorder from doing something bad themselves or experiencing something bad from others. I think this is mostly for people that feel bad about doing the bad things themselves, but maybe a bit of both. If I serve others in dealing with this stuff and overcoming it and so on, and that's all I do, then I will have earned sainthood through the sheer trials I've been through mentally and so on. But the reason why I will be that way, if I'm successful in my efforts to serve others and so on properly for their good and thriving and happiness and joy and life and plenitude and so on, and liberty and freedom and virtue and enjoyment of life, is because when I was faced with this, as God was guiding me through all this, so it's not like I was facing this and I was just diehard bravado all the way and it's all me and so on. No, it was God guiding me on a tour through these visions. Is I chose to try to pay for it in blood when I felt like I was doing this. And after I stopped doing it because I wasn't succeeding for a long time, I mean, I tried 46 times. I gave up on that basically, but I was tempted to do it for years after. And God would guide me to this point and then guide me out of it and so on. And God nursed me back to spiritual and mental health somewhat. Maybe not perfectly at the moment, but it's on the right trajectory upwards and so on. But that's what I was dealing with. That's what broke me. It wasn't that I thought that I was possibly responsible for an abortion of my unborn child. It wasn't that I threatened my ex-girlfriend one time over text. It wasn't that she left me. These things hurt a lot, but they didn't break me entirely. Those visions of hell after I became schizophrenic broke me. And part of it is because I did those other things as well, and I was like, well, I know I'm kind of bad, so maybe deep down inside I'm just looking to do evil, and just my entire goodness is a veneer, a mask, to hide my evil so that I can do more of it even. So that's the relationship of imperfection and flaw and sinfulness and so on. That people face and so on. And I'm going to give a link in the description of Saint SILOUAN, the Athonite, chapter 10, Spiritual Trials by Saint Sophrony. I believe is what it's called. Let me just load up the page real quick. Written by Saint Sophrony of Essex. So, yeah. I'm going to give a link to that in the description. And you can check it out, and it'll give a narrative of what was going on in the wider spiritual, metaphysical, cosmic order in a way that is Christian. But I wanted to relay my experience so that someone else can be like, oh, that's what's going on.
Written by Elder Sophrony.
Sorry, it was I didn't load it up properly at first, and then I loaded it up, and then it started playing. So you heard a little bit of that murmuring and talking, I guess, and so on. But I'll link it in the description and so on. And basically, I had a glimpse of the mind of Satan, basically. And the thing is, I am built and guided by God to be serving and self-sacrificial. It's not all about me, as much as I kind of like good things for myself and so on. It's about what I can do for other people, basically. Hopefully. And maybe I can get something good out of doing good service and work for others and so on. Towards their legitimate good ends and so on. Spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, societally, civilizationally. Um, I kind of want it all myself. I want heaven, but I also want like the typical good life that people typically want. And that's what I want for other people as well, basically, both of those things. So it's not like I'm like, I must be a monk and celibate and like never have a girlfriend again or something. And I'm not all like, oh, it's all about sex, cocaine, and rock and roll, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I'm not like that. Um, but if God wasn't guiding me, then maybe I would break completely and never recover. Um, Now the thing about it is, I want to say is, my experience might be a little wild compared to other people's, but I think I know what the purpose of that is. It's so that someone can say he's been through so much and it's something similar to what I was experiencing in some way and he's recovered. And I think that's why I'm going to get the good life, so that it's like a selling point that like, hey, it's sort of like Jordan Peterson or something, selling himself based on his critical acclaim and like popularity or something. Like, I'm super popular. I'm respected by experts. You should trust me. Kind of in a sense. I think I'm going to get well off because it's sort of like a vibe to that in a sense. I'm not. Sometime in the future, as like an example or an exemplar champion of God's, in regards to maybe not like wider politics and wisdom and tactical acumen or strategery or strategicness, or like get rich knowledge, finance bro kind of things, or like super expert on warfare and fighting and stuff like that stuff. But being generally competent at a couple of those things, not really the money making generally, but I think I'm going to luck out or something and hit my niche. And this video, at least, is to describe the pits of despair I went through and how God rescued me. That I must credit God for guiding me through this entire process and so on. I was broken so many times, and God rescued me and so on. And at this point in time, because God has nursed me back to health, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually at least, I feel like I can say I've been reborn finally. It was a little traumatizing just remembering my visions of hell earlier this morning, but I felt it was important to relay this so that people can know just how far gone someone can be and how far God is willing to go to meet you, to bring you to the light, to home, to something you can appreciate. And I don't mean force yourself to smile at or something like that, but I mean something you will want to smile at happily, not out of a sort of, if I didn't laugh, I'd cry, or if I didn't laugh, I'd scream in terror kind of way. Because those are other things that I was feeling multiple times over the course of this whole process and so on. I will warn, though, that it seems as if my efforts to pay in blood myself for my supposed wrongdoing when I was visioning hell and so on and thought I was responsible for it for everyone and so on, is a personality distinction from people who say, well, it's a lost cause. I'll just forcibly drag as many people with me as possible if I'm going down. Kind of a revenge drive against God for the crime of being, or others' lives for the crime of being. Kind of like they're happy, I'm not. I'm going to make them unhappy, to make myself feel powerful or something, so I'm a little less unhappy. There are people like that, and there are people that choose that path, and so on. And quite honestly, those people might be beyond human capacity to save. And if Satan exists, he might be beyond God's capability to save, because God respects your choices. And that's the other thing. My own agency was in question because I wasn't sure about whether or not my most deep understood thoughts were a mask. Even my deepest understanding of myself was a mask, possibly, is what I was thinking at the time. And and I basically I chose to try and sacrifice myself to prevent these things from happening, or to send myself first into the void of the abyss of the maw, of the abyss of insanity, as a sacrifice in case my own suffering and death would pay whatever was calling for everyone else's. That was my sort of choice when faced with this vision of hell. Now, you can call it insanity, and it probably is on some level, but I just wanted to tell you the grain of what faith was for me at the time. When I wasn't trying to do that, after I gave up on it, it was faith in God's goodness and guidance, a thin thread of hope beyond hope. And I understand that very clearly, because at the time I was like, well, this is what he keeps telling me, but at the same time, there's C.S. Lewis and all these references to God as good in the Bible and even the Quran and the Torah and like Hinduism and Buddhism and Shintoism and even the Aztecs to some extent, and Greeks and Romans and Celtics and Nordics and Germanics, and everyone basically says God is generally a good guy on some level compared to humans on some level. There's something about God that is good, and that's what kept me going. Is the strength of the narratives in their numbers and commonality throughout the world, not my own belief based on what synchronicity or schizophrenia was telling me. And I guess I was set to the extremes of the experience in some way so that I can add to that number of people commending God and giving him credit as ultimately good, and so on. And that he's trustworthy. Now you might say, why is there so much evil in the world, and so on? And what if there's an evil God and a good God that are equal in power? And my vision was the ultimate God is evil. But C.S. Lewis does have a good argument that kind of drew me out of this vision of hell, basically, and worry and fears and so on. Which is, we know the world is kind of crooked in a way, on some level. And a good God is the only God that can tell us right from wrong, because they know right. A God that is wrong cannot know straight. A God that is crooked cannot know straight, because the God is crooked, and the God is everything that they are. And if crooked is all they are, then they don't know straight. And if a God is straight, then they might not know crooked. So, you know, when you're crooked, God doesn't know you, possibly. Yeah. But then, how do you differentiate what's better, crooked or straight? And the answer is, there must be a God above them that determines whether crooked or straight is better. And that ties into the common understanding of evil as a parasite, evil itself as a parasite, and how evil cannot exist without good. Because what's true can always exist without what's not true. But what's not true is based on what is true. So ultimately, truth, good, and goodness, and straightness, straight and narrow maybe as the path goes, but like, you know what I mean, that kind of straightness. I don't mean non-homosexual entirely or something like that. But straightness, goodness, truth is original, and crookedness, evil, and falsehood are reliant and parasitical on the previous three. So what's more ultimate? What can exist without the other? And then you know what is ultimately stronger. And the thing I noticed is I was humming and hawing about adding this to the video that as I was planning to make this video and so on. But then a neighbor came by and I relayed my vision of hell and so on. And I was humming and hawing about adding this part to the video at first, back when I was planning the video, before I relayed it to her. But she said something very poignant, which is, that sounds like our elites. And, you know, I think I might have some influence with some people who are reasonably popular on YouTube or something. I'm not sure. Maybe it's only one person, maybe it's no one actually, and it's all just coincidences and so on. But if I do have influence, then I was thinking about it, and part of what I was thinking about is what differentiates a legitimate prophet of God from someone with a God complex. Emotionally, pride is a big problem for both of them, so that's not it. Mentally, they're both trying to envisage a worldview of how people should behave, so that's not it. And spiritually is where the difference is. Spiritually, the legitimate prophet is open, honest with themselves as well as other people. And they're not out to twist other people. Especially not for personal gain. And that's the difference. It's the spiritual difference. Now, God was guiding me, and I don't think He'll guide other people quite as far as I went, both in the experience direction of hell, visions of hell, or the the hand holding that He's been doing for me personally. So I'm not going to advise that you do that, but I think almost possibly maybe God was doing it for me so that I would relay my experiences so that I could provide a framework of the limits and extents of despair and loss in regards to the spiritual, and provide a testimony, a friendly, open heart and friendly word and encouragement that God has got your back if you're going through these. And that He doesn't want you to suffer and despair forever. At most, He wants it a little bit as a bit of a sort of get to know the bottom so you can figure out which direction upwards is and then go upwards. And I almost think, even if it were true that I was like what my visions of hell were, the good Almighty God is so far beyond us that you cannot murder Him, no matter what. Even if everyone stopped believing in Him, He would pop back in and prove His existence to some, and they would rekindle the belief, and so on. And you cannot murder God. Maybe incarnate as a person, but you cannot murder God in the spirit world. That is beyond the mortal, beyond the physical, in control of the physical. And furthermore, even if my visions of hell for myself were basically true except for murdering God, God would, and that's impossible like I'm explaining here, technically, just purely impossible. God is the act of being itself. You cannot stop being itself. But anyways, except for that one act of murdering God, which is impossible to do except if He incarnates in a body, and even then He'll pop back alive in His body and be in the spirit world at the same time, alive and well the entire time in the spirit world. He would rescue you if you felt regret. That's the saintly path of understanding. The satanic path is in for a penny, in for a pound on harming other people for bad reasons. You know, obviously justice exists and so on, and sometimes it can be rather harsh, but deserved. Which is what I learned through this process and so on. That's why I believe in death to child rapists and so on. And my ex was a bit young, but still legal aged. You know, I kind of said, okay, well, morally I'm a child rapist, I guess, so I'm going to visit death upon myself and so on. You know. And I gave up because 46 times is a lot. And like, if you fail every time for like nearly 50 times, you know, eventually it's kind of like, okay, maybe God wants me alive for real. You know. And this process and journey of understanding and explaining these things and possibly offering a way to help other people out, hopefully in the future, is my guess as to why God kept me alive. And also because I volunteered for justice. I didn't like wait for someone to force it on me. I was like, well, God's saying I deserve it. No one else is. No one else knows about it. Or everyone who knows about it doesn't care about that part. But I deserve it. God says I do. I kind of agree now that I think about it. So I'm going to do this to myself. You know, and that's part of the process. That self-sacrificial element for the sake of justice. If you've been in the wrong. You know, and that's the difference between the saintly path and the satanic path. Saintly path is a sinner who repents. The satanic path is a sinner who embraces the wickedness. And some people are just built different. And some people are guided by God towards certain ends, and some people are led by Satan towards different ends. You know, and my path is saintly in the end, ultimately, I think, because I'm willing to pay for my mistakes. I'm willing to pay for my malevolence. I'm not trying to hide it. I'm not trying to kill the witnesses. I'm not trying to silence the critics. I'm owning up to my mistakes. And if you're naturally inclined towards that, or you're willing to choose to do that, God will guide you through the paths of the valley of death and through the gates of hell all the way to heaven, as far as I can tell. And if you choose the other path, if you choose to be vindictive and vengeful and think of only what's bad towards you and never let go of the things in a vindictive and revenge-driven way, or a woe is me, pity is me, I'm the only one that's ever faced it. Because I don't even think my visions of hell are like something only I've faced. Like, I think H.P. Lovecraft and Saint SILOUAN and like other monks and stuff like that at least have faced this as well. I don't know who else necessarily, but I imagine this is something schizophrenics of all stripes kind of, sort of, can go through on some level. So my path is service and sacrifice, and hopefully that'll bring me to the end. Service, sacrifice, truth, and trust in God. And so far it's led me to the pits of despair and then led me out of it somewhat. And it seems to be getting more and more positive as time goes. I guess I had a bit of a, St. SILOUAN the Athonite, chapter 10, Spiritual Trials. I'll link it in the description. And I guess what I've been going through is a bit of a midlife crisis as well. What a midlife crisis that is. But, I didn't get to buy a car to put it off, but, whatever. This is sort of the Jungian journey into the embracing the shadow, journey into the underworld, hero's journey kind of situation. And Dante's Inferno, Purgatory, and I don't remember what his heaven book is called, but he's got 3 of them. One is hell, one is purgatory, one is heaven. And I'm in the purgatory phase at the moment, which is out of hell, out of the worst. Still going through a little bit of a trial in some sense, but it's like you're promised heaven as long as you keep going at this point. And it's getting a little better and better every time, and so on. So, or not, well, okay, there's a bit of a 2 steps back, forwards and 1 step back kind of situation a little bit in this regard. But, the progress is there, and I am a stronger man because of it, and a more moral man because of it, and so on. I can call for justice for wrongdoers because I've given myself justice for my wrongdoing and my failures and inadequacies and flaws and errors and mistakes. I've learned from them somewhat. This is the path. The only way out is through. But God will guide you and protect you and bless you if you trust in Him and walk forwards. That's the final message I wish to leave.